Characteristics of Ashbery's poetry. John Ashbery today is one of the most influential poetic voices of America, and his popularity is increasing with every coming day. However, one cannot eliminate the shadow of doubt and controversy from his status as a poet. He is great experimenter in the modern day art of versification. He, with some of the young poets of the era, tried to prove that the tradition of American poetry can still have vitality if read from its controversial restraints. It will not be wrong to say that no other American poet of modern day has enjoyed such varied and abundant criticism as is enjoyed by John Ashbery. The chief feature of Ashbery as a poet may be his complexity. He is more complex than he is often thought to be. He is highly conscious artist and a penetrating thinker. According to Bailey, his primary artistic achievement rests on his blending of thought and emotion and symbolic imagery, which give a greater vitality to his poetry. What may add complexity to his themes is his controversial tone in almost every poem, using familiar tone and topics and employing technical symbols. He compels the reader for deep thinking. His complexity is enhanced by the metaphysical thoughts in his poetry. He follows some of the traits of his poetry in the traditions of Emerson, Frost, and Emily Dickinson. He tries to go beyond the seen to unseen. A hasty reading of his poem will not allow us to see anything, rather, it looks as the poet is describing only a common event or object observed by him. As in all great poetry of such kind, the tension increases between the simple fact and the mystery which surrounds it. Ashbery, in his poems, either isolates the individual or treats mankind in the mass as a nation or race. Poem after poem shows the speaker running off or living alone. Most of his poems deal with the modern themes such as alienation and isolation of man from his fellow men. In his poems as The Painter and Melodic Train, he does deal with the themes of alienation and isolation, but he does not approve it. In his poetry, he portrays the barrier between man and makes a projection of the theme of isolation. He dislikes this isolation for man being the member of society. He insists on recognizing these barriers and not avoid the topic. In short, Ashbery's view of society and man is consistent throughout. Each man to him is a stranger and an isolated being, and so he remains for most of the time. John Ashbery is also an expert in using symbols in his poetry. While many of Ashbery's poems are simple and plain, there are many which expose their true meaning when probed deeper. We can take the example of the painter in this regard. The painter depicts in the poem fails to follow his will as the people in the building does not like it. Thus, through the use of very simple symbols, Ashbery comments on the aggressive attitude of the society and so-called authorities, who may consider every individual action as a rebel one. The beauty of all this has been that the simplest and common words have been used in the poem, yet it is deeply meditative and has a profound significance. Thus, John Ashbery, being the poet of modern day realities, was well aware of the literary methods that may suit to his poetic temperament. Nature and natural surroundings are certainly important ingredients of John Ashbery's poems, but we cannot certainly call him a nature poet. In the tradition of William Wordsworth, his poems suggest that nature is a fairly comprehensive term, meanings of which changes from poem to poem. He is not very much concerned with developing a philosophically consistent concept of nature, though nature is important to him, but he does not take it as an object of philosophical speculation. What really interests him is man's reaction to his surroundings and other human beings. Such phenomena do not require elaborated philosophical analysis for their understanding. In short, he takes nature as a part of the things to which we have to confront. John Ashbery is modern poet in every sense of the word. Apart from their themes, the most modern aspect of his poems is the delineation of characters. His characters tell us the bare truth and the process by which they arrive at that truth. Ashbery not only depicts the outward events and conditions of the modern day world but also the uncertainty and the painful sense of loss which are characteristics of modern age. They are always there in his poems. The contemporary nature of Ashbery's poem is a fact that must be readily recognized. Another modern aspect of his poetry has been his depiction of individuals and their problems in modern capitalistic world. It is through the depiction of the individual psyche and his set of problems that he takes us to some of the larger realities of life. However, we should not quote any writer as being modern because he was born in the present age and wrote in it. Modernity is a concept strictly related to spirit, and Ashbery is modern in that sense too. His concern with the word greater importance to the individual freedom, condemnation of so-called protectors of humanity, and above all the way he tries to study the flaw of human thoughts make him a modern poet. To conclude, we may say that Ashbery's career is of great importance for the world in general and America in particular. He restored that poetry of the reader that had been lost. He wrote almost 20 books on poetry in which he packed all sorts of information and messages. In short, it would not be wrong to say that Ashbery is an echoing voice of the present day American society because of his poetic appeal. A critic said about Ashbery's poetry that it is a process of thought rather than the object which mind perceives. It is also said about his poetry, of all his experimentalism, his poetry expresses happiness and woe. If the woes are described comically, they are still woes. Ashbery himself says that he aims to record the generalized transcript of what is going in our mind all day long. There is no message, nothing. I want to tell the word particularly, but I am thinking when I am writing. Ashbery also said how wonderful it would be when a painter combines the inexhaustibility of poetry with the concreteness of painting. At another time, Ashbery said, my poetry imitates or reproduces the way in which knowledge or wisdom comes to me. It is by fits and starts and by indication. I don't think that any poetry arranged in neat pattern would reflect such thing.